everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Frank About Health. Today, I am pleased to finally have the fourth member of the Swanson family join us on today's episode, Jenny Swanson. If you all recall, we've gone over this several times. Danielle Swanson started last year with me, and then her father, James Swanson, had been on several episodes with me and my co-host, Phyllis Quinlan. And finally, we have the opportunity to learn a lot about the therapy and the practice and understand a lot about where horses get involved in this episode, which was looking at equestrian therapy, but more on a bigger scale. And that being said, I think the title we've just agreed upon, would you like to say it, Phyllis, just so that we can make everyone know for sure during the hour what our focus of this episode is going to be?
So we're actually going to deviate away from equestrian therapy and talk more about what Jen is giving her academic life to right now, which is understanding sports performance and some of the intricacies and the psychology behind the mental health of athletes.
Exactly. And then I think one of the unique elements of that, a lot of people undergo therapy with social workers or psychologists or psychiatrists, depending on the disorder. But in Jenny Swanson's case, they are predominantly horse riders, equestrians, and I guess of all age groups. That being said, Jenny, again, first of all, welcome to this episode of Frank About Health. But what is your age group of your clients? Is it from as young as 5 to can you give me the age range?
Yeah, absolutely. So typically I work with equestrians people that ride horses, but you typically can't start riding a horse until about 5 years old. So I work with riders from age 5 to up to 75. So it's a wide range.
Very nice. What have you found, especially during the pandemic, to be a challenge for you in your practice? Or were you able to work during the pandemic in helping equestrian clients of yours?
So I didn't start my private practice until January in 2021. So I was still at the time in 2020 when the pandemic hit, getting my independent license from Massachusetts as a licensed independent clinical social worker. So I was still working, getting my hours doing that. And so when I started my private practice, I moved down to Florida where there was a big 12-week competition down there. And things by that point had kind of gone back to normal a little bit. So we were able to meet in person somewhat. We still had the masks on, of course. And so we were able to kind of finagle it that way a little bit.
Awesome. Did you always know, even prior to 2021, that the mental health field was your chosen profession? What was your big impetus that got you focused in not only getting training and academic preparation, but of course, opening up a practice for the mental health issues?
Yeah, I remember in high school, my senior year, taking psychology and economics. And I remember thinking I'm either going to get a job like my dad or go into psychology because I kind of liked psychology. And I got my first D in economics. And I got an ECA in psychology. And I just kind of kept pursuing that in courses I took in undergraduate, getting my undergraduate degree. I mastered in psychology and minored in child and adolescent studies. So I kind of kept taking the classes that I liked, and they kept being, child and adolescent psychology. And then I took 2 years off to compete in horseback riding, and because I'm a competitive equestrian myself, and then went on to get my master's in clinical social work. So
you ride yourself competitively, right, Jen?
Yes.
That's amazing. So I am not athletic. I'm totally cerebral. I can't walk and chew gum. So I'm so envious of anybody who is athletic in any capacity. Let alone on the competitive level. So the question I have for you is, what are the characteristics of a great competitor?
I definitely think a great competitor comes from a place of discipline and that strong work ethic, but also that competitive piece too, where you want to challenge yourself and put yourself into almost anxiety-producing situations that other people might not very well do, like getting on a horse and running at high speeds towards stationary objects.
Running at high speeds towards stationary objects. Well, there you go.
Yeah.
I can relate to the adrenaline junkie in you. I think that's what I'm hearing. Being someone who practiced emergency nursing, I'm love the good trauma that comes through the door kind of thing. God help me. And that's kind of like running towards a stationary object, I promise you. But I can understand the competitive side. You've made a decision to compete yourself. You've made a decision to take your athletic capability to the highest level that's possible for you. What made you decide that you wanted to work with others? Did you see something that might be less than mental health producing and thought you had an answer or a technique and approach for that?
Yeah, I did. When I was 16, I fell off. I was competing in Florida and fell off and broke my back. So that was my first introduction to a major injury. And as I was rehabbing, I got back on my horse 3 months later, which is not that soon after. And I kept riding and competing. And then a few months to almost a year later, I couldn't get her over a jump. Essentially, what that means is I had such a big mental block that the height of the jump, which I was jumping before, I could barely get around something like low on the ground. I had such terror and almost PTSD from my accident. So I started seeing my own sports psychologist. And as I grew into the sport and overcame my own obstacles, I realized there needed to be more mental health professionals in the field and ones that competed like we do, that kind of knew the lingo a little bit. So I definitely saw a need there.
It seems as though basically that you were basically taking your interest in psychology and at the same time your love of riding horses. And after your injury, you now found the medical need for equestrian therapy, or at the same time, helping people who are already thriving on that anxiety to continue competing, work with it to keep it in their training. So it's like treatment for those that are suffering from PTSD or other traumas, while at the same time maintaining the level of appropriate anxiety to maintain the level of competition.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a dichotomy.
Without getting too much into your personal health information, what was the one thing you had to overcome to get back over those jumps?
It was definitely my anxiety for sure. I didn't get diagnosed with anxiety until later in life, like 19, 20-ish. And I didn't start medication until then myself. So I think, looking back on my adolescence, I think we all have kind of light bulb moments of like, oh yeah, that was kind of off, or, maybe that was something there. And I always like to even share that with my clients too, that I am on medication myself because it is something that we share and we have in common. We struggle with these mental health issues, and sometimes it has to get a little bit worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was something I chugged along with for so long. And then when it kind of bit me in the butt a little bit and I couldn't overcome it or deal with it myself, I needed to reach out and seek that support. And I saw, a sports psychologist that is now a good mentor of mine that has definitely helped and guided me as I've started my own practice.
Yeah. I have a bit of an understanding around fear and anxiety, certainly not at the level of your academic preparation. But my understanding of fear is it's something you can name. I have a fear of horses, I have a fear of heights, I have a fear of fire, you can name it. My understanding of anxiety is somewhat more of a free-floating terror, that, it's a sensation that's almost nameless. It's kind of like that cloud that's there that you're trying to get through. Is that what it was? Was it more anticipatory? I don't know what's going to happen. I can't name it. It's just, it's in front of me, holding me back, as opposed to I have an actual fear of falling again. I have an actual fear of getting a career-threatening injury. I mean, certainly a broken back is nothing to sneeze at. That is a severe injury, and thankfully you're back to being able to ride again. Help me understand anxiety better.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a little bit of both of what you were noting too, and especially when I talk to different riders or any client that comes to see me with any mental health need, I like to distinguish the difference between anxiety and nervousness, especially as competitors. In a situation that is a competition and there's high stakes involved, you're more likely to feel nervous, right? That makes sense. It's understandable. With anxiety, like you noted, there's kind of this overwhelming, impending sense of doom. And you can rationalize that you shouldn't feel that way. You know you're safe. You know the things around you, the situation is somewhat predictable, but this feeling kind of isn't going away. And that's that noted difference between anxiety and nervousness. And in athletes and performers, you're essentially tricking your mind into thinking that it's safe and it's okay because, you know, not just equestrian sports, but when you think about swimmers or, you know, runners or, you know, people pushing the physical limits of themselves, of course, their brain is going to note that fight or flight response and tell you, okay, are we checking in? Are we good? Like, this seems a little dangerous, right? Are we anxiety's coming? And then you kind of have to rationalize yourself like, no, we're doing this for fun. So got to buck down and get it done. So that real difference between anxiety and nervousness is definitely something I like to note too.
So Jenny, on that note, have you ever seen, since you've been building your practice, clients or patients come to you with anxiety issues that don't necessarily ride or are not actually there, but you tell them in part of your treatment modality to start riding to help them? Do you have patients like that or clients like that?
I don't know. Most of the people that I work with in my private practice have already started riding. And sometimes when they come to me, they want help in the athletic realm, in the sport performance realm. And then when we take a few layers back or we're in session and we're talking about it, we notice it's other things that are causing that disruption in sport. And we need to kind of talk about the family and the friends and kind of other things that are causing the issues in the sport.
Right. Okay, well, 2 minutes to break, but we want to break down all the various mental health issues that you've had a chance to work with in your practice and really show difference between the type of practice you have versus other types of clinical social workers or psychologists. But also, I forgot to add our disclaimer. Remember, everyone out there, the purpose of this episode of Frank About Health is not to lead you or contradict the current treatment modalities that you are using, not to dissuade you from continuing the medications that you need. We are here to have a very open, honest, and healthy, welcoming conversation with the expertise of Danielle Swanson. Of course, the questions that we will derive from you out there on YouTube, as well as Phyllis from the medical professional side, her experience as a professional nurse. And at the same time, we just want to make sure that you're all aware these are not the opinions or views of talkradio.nyc or Frank About Health, but rather an open forum for discussion. And so that being said, we will be back in a couple minutes after these messages. So please stay tuned.
Are you a business owner? Do you want to be a business owner? Do you work with business owners? Hi, I'm Stephen Fry, your small and medium-sized business or SMB guy, and I'm the host of the new show, Always Friday. While I love to have fun on my show, we take those Friday feelings of freedom and clarity to discuss popular topics on the minds of SMBs today. Please join me and my various special guests on Friday at 11 a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a conscious co-creator? Are you on a quest to raise your vibration and your consciousness? I'm Sam Leibowitz, your conscious consultant, and on my show, The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, we will touch upon all these topics and more. Listen live at our new time on Thursdays at 12 noon Eastern Time. That's The Conscious Consultant Hour, Awakening Humanity, Thursdays, 12 noon on talkradio.nyc.
Are you on edge? Hey, we live in challenging, edgy times, so let's lean in. I'm Sandra Bargman, the host of The Edge of Every Day, which airs each Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc. Tune in live with me and my friends and colleagues as we share stories and perspectives about pushing boundaries and exploring our rough edges. That's The Edge of Every Day on Mondays at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC. Uplift, educate, empower.
Welcome back. We're here with Jenny Swanson and Phyllis Quinlan as we're talking about sports performance therapy. And predominantly during this conversation, we're talking about equestrians. Now, in terms of the mental health disorders, you mentioned trauma, you mentioned PTSD. Do you have a specific, I don't know if you call it a bucket list or at least a specialty in specific mental duress or mental illnesses that you have dealt with your clients?
Yeah, so I was the first graduating class of Simmons when I got my master's in 2018 to also have a specialty in trauma. So my specialty and where I have my extra hours of practice is in trauma practice. And that can range, I always like to define trauma really as anything that has happened to you that's unexpected and that causes either like a physical or psychological change and has impacted you. So you and I could drive by the same car accident and you could go home and be okay. And I could go home and have nightmares for a week. And it really had triggered something inside of me. So when I talk with different clients and my specialty being trauma, I still see a wide range of other mental health needs and issues. I don't necessarily turn anyone away, but there are definitely more mental health issues I'm a little bit more comfortable with or have more experience with in terms of more ones that you see more normally in terms of anxiety or depression and things like that. Whereas some of the psychosis diagnoses you see a little bit less, but I would say my main specialty is trauma.
Wow. So then anxiety and depression are symptoms of that trauma rather than actual core issues that you're treating directly?
A little bit of both, right? So yes, they can be symptoms, but also they can kind of be their own entity too.
I see. Oh, Phyllis, did you have a question?
I did. So I think I'm hearing that you have two focuses. Certainly the mental health piece in overcoming trauma or anxiety issues that you yourself went through and navigated successfully. But when we talk about the performance piece of an athlete, are we talking more about what motivates them? What creates a winner mentality? Are you working with those kind of mindsets as well to enhance confidence and competence in the athlete themselves, that they are indeed winning and therefore they compete better?
Yes, definitely. I would say some of my work is performance based. So they want to get to the national final, they want to win a championship, things like that. So they definitely want to improve their performance. And that's definitely a huge piece of it. And sometimes, kind of like what I said before, when you first meet with someone, normally there's been things that have been going on for a long time. Sometimes people kind of come and want to get a head start and figure out, how to get those mental skills in place. But sometimes they do come to me and things haven't been going well for a while. And there's a bigger issue that we kind of need to address, whether it's a traumatic fall or, a horse, something with a horse, they're an animal too. So horses can unfortunately die, your partner can pass away, things like that. Mm-hmm. So definitely it depends a little bit on the individual, but you can see a wide range of stuff for sure.
So if someone's actually not necessarily struggling with anxiety and things of that nature, but they just want to increase that competitive edge, what are some of the techniques that you employ to get them to that next level?
I definitely love to start off with goal setting. I think goal setting can be a great avenue to figure out what those goals are, what that outcome goal is that you want to achieve. And then you break it down into what's called process goals, right? How are you going to achieve it? You want to win that championship. Okay, what do you need to do that? It's not just results based. It's then those techniques and skills that we need to write down and then come up with a list, right? Goal setting can be such intricate work in terms of making sure you're practicing those skills each and every day. And then in that can also be imagery or working on self-talk or relaxation skills when that anxiety level gets a little bit high. So, I think the list of mental skills is incredibly long. Those are a few that I use pretty regularly.
Do you ever encourage them to, I guess I want to use the term cross-train, but I don't know if that's exactly what I'm asking. So, all of your clients are equestrians. Do you say, okay, it's time to take a 2-week hiatus from that and go swim or start jogging or maybe a little weight training or things of that nature, do you ask them to mix it up as a way of keeping themselves fit, but giving their minds a much needed, maybe healthy break?
I encourage it for sure. I definitely can't say I've looked at a client and said, you need to go on vacation for 2 weeks. I've definitely
and do nothing. Don't go near a horse, right?
Right. I've definitely encouraged that, what is called a healthy athletic identity, right? So, for any athlete, whether it's an NFL player or horseback rider, if your weight in everything you do of every minute of every day is based on that sport, then when the outcome of that sport, whether you get hurt or you lose a game, it ruins the rest of your day, your week, your month, right? It can be so, so tragic. And when you have other things, right, to look forward to or to put your energy towards, it's going to have that defeat or those mistakes, those errors and setbacks be less overwhelming. And unfortunately, we know as humans, we're imperfect. So those mistakes and those setbacks and errors are going to come. So it's a little bit of understanding that healthy, robust athletic identity of being able to put your time and energy into things outside of your sport is going to help you become a better athlete and not hinder it, because taking time away is helpful. Strength training, I always encourage, like you said, I love strength training. I do it myself. I love powerlifting. And that's helped my riding so much. So I definitely use that personal aspect too with my clients and encourage them to get to the gym or find another sport that they can dabble in.
So are you struggling just a little bit with parental oversight? Do you find parents have their own way of maybe wanting to coach their child athlete, and it doesn't necessarily comport with best practice? We've all heard stories of, tennis dads or, parents that are, I guess helicopter parents. They're hovering, they're pushing, they almost living vicariously through their children. Is that an exaggeration of what actually is going on, or do you think that actually does happen, and that's part of the challenge of what your practice has to work with?
I think it's a little bit twofold. I can see in my own experience too, working with children, kids under 18, having that parent aspect, having, what people call helicopter parents, and them being overbearing or having unrealistic expectations, wanting their child to go to the Olympics, and they're so far from that, right? That's definitely an aspect of it. But what, especially because I'm a therapist, I like to come from it with a point of empathy, right? And understanding that what the parent wants for the child. And 9 times out of 10, it's always what they want is just the best for their child. And sometimes you can get into some tricky mental health projection, I like to call it, of a parent living vicariously through their child and an opportunity that they didn't get to do that they wish they could, and forcing dreams and goals on a child. Yes, for sure. That definitely happens. But from how I look at it, or I guess, quote unquote, treat it, is just a place of conversation, right? And kind of going back to things inside our control and outside of our control, and not trying to let that become such an overbearing aspect. But it can be tricky, especially when you work with kids under 18 and they tell you something, a conversation they have with their parents, and their parents said something different. That can be definitely hard. But when you work with the individual, you can help to guide them in what is in their control to help them manage those things.
So every now and then you're orchestrating, I guess, for lack of a better term, a therapeutic triangle, where you're at one point, the parent's on another point, the child is at another point, and we're trying to find middle ground where create that win-win, or at least create that conversation where maybe for reasons of, I don't want to disappoint, or I don't have psychological safety around, I don't want to do this anymore, you have to facilitate that. Can you speak to that a bit?
Absolutely. And that triangle, like you said, can even be with a professional too, with the coach, right? So the coach might have an aspect and, I guess, outlook on what they think the child can do, what the child, they themselves think they can do, and then what the parent wants. And then me as, the sport and performance consultant or therapist in the room, kind of what I see as well. And that can be really tricky. From my role, my perspective, there's only so much I can share, right? Because of confidentiality and HIPAA. Mm-hmm. So I would never break that. But at the same time, too, mediating those conversations so everyone can see each point of view is helpful, but as a therapist, it can also be frustrating because I can see what's behind the curtain a little bit. So that's definitely hard for sure. One of the harder
I can
parts.
just imagine, my word. Yeah, you're tiptoeing around that for sure.
Yeah.
One of the
So the
biggest
adults that you see in your practice, are they predominantly the parents of the children you see, or do they also have their own training or mental health issues that are focused on just them? I mean, there's obviously not going to be that much parental oversight for someone in their 40s or 50s. So I'm trying to understand exactly like what percentage of your adult patients are predominantly the parents of your children patients, or are they individual patients themselves?
So I like to look at majority of my clients are adults. I have a certain percentage of children, and I don't look at the children's parents as clients, right? That's more like collateral contact.
Mhm.
And then I have adult clients, right? So those are just over 18. So that would be like the differentiating piece there.
I see. It sounds like to me you're both a social worker and, of course, using therapeutic procedures to help people who have trauma-based anxiety and other kinds of issues we've discussed. But you are also like a sports trainer, I guess.
Yep,
Very interesting.
Yeah.
What led you to decide to now really go after the PhD in this field and really do your own research and possible publishing of your study?
I always dreamed of having a PhD. I've always wanted a doctorate degree. I just wanted to be called Dr. J. I think that's a real heavy thing to it. But besides that, I never, and I always, when people have asked me for career advice or, kids in college wondering they want to do the psychology route, I always tell them, from my perspective, I just kept taking classes and saying yes to things I wanted to do and I enjoyed. And when I had an experience that I didn't like, I remember particularly having this one internship that I did not like, working with a population that just wasn't my niche, learning from that and then just doing the opposite, right? And so I just kind of kept saying yes. And so I can't say that from a young age I wanted to start my own private practice and work with equestrians. I never really thought that was my end goal, but it kind of worked out that way. And when I saw that need, it felt right. I was like, okay, let's do it. Just kind of kept saying yes or kept following what I wanted to do. So it definitely at times was a little precarious. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but it ended up working out. And I love it. I love meeting the people that I do, and my clients are amazing. So
awesome.
Do you see yourself expanding to other sports in the near future or at some point? Or have you found your niche?
I definitely think I found my niche. I do think, especially when you're in school to become a sport and performance psychologist, they tell you don't necessarily need that sport experience. However, talking with athletes that play that sport or do that
relatability,
sport,
yes,
they tell you otherwise, right? They do want to sit with someone that understands what they mean when they say the 100 butterfly meter stroke. I don't even know if that's a thing, right? But something like that, right? And so, and especially with horseback riding, it's incredibly intricate. So I do think that would be where I would stay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're about to take our second break. That being said, please stay tuned as we are here talking about sports performance therapy with Jenny Swanson and Phyllis Quinlan right here on talkradio.nyc. and on the Talking Alternative Broadcasting YouTube channel. And if you have any questions, please go into the comment or chat box on the YouTube channel, and we will be able, any questions or comments, we'll be able to bring them to the conversation as well as do our best to answer them for you. That all being said, stay tuned. We'll be back in a few.
Are you passionate about the conversation around racism? Hi, I'm Reverend Dr. TLC, host of the Dismantle Racism Show, which airs every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on talkradio.nyc. Join me and my amazing guests as we discuss ways to uncover, dismantle, and eradicate racism. That's Thursdays at 11 o'clock a.m. on talkradio.nyc.
Are you a small business trying to navigate the COVID-19 related employment laws? Hello, I'm Eric Sauver, employment law, business law attorney, and host of the new radio show, Employment Law Today. On my show, we'll have guests to discuss the common employment law challenges business owners are facing during these trying times. Tune in on Tuesday evenings from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Time on talkradio.nyc.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy D, the Nonprofit Sector Connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on TalkRadio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on TalkRadio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Everybody, and welcome back. We were just having a nice discussion about what motivated Jenny to pursue her advanced education in sports therapy, especially with equestrians, among other issues. But I think like what we've been talking about over the past half hour is you have a lot of the parents of children who work in the treatment of the mental health issues, and they are, I mean, the children are writers too, right? Or is it predominantly the parents?
So the kids under 18 that I work with are my clients. Right. And sometimes I will consult, or my collateral work will be with their parent and incorporate their parent into the work that we're doing. And then I also have people over 18, right, who are riders, and they might be parents themselves.
Oh, okay. All right. And so for those that are the children, do you find that you use a different type of model versus the adult with the parents, where you are just trying to really engage the relationship with the horse as a means of bonding and creating and reducing the anxiety that they may be suffering from, for example? Like the whole concept of a support animal, but in this case, I know a horse is not a support animal like the way a puppy is, or even a small pet that you may have when you take with you on trips. But in this case, the whole nature of the relationship between the child and the horse must be very interdynamic, or you must have seen the kind of bonding that happens that really helps them foster confidence and self-esteem issues that probably they were not aware of, correct?
Yeah, and I think it can get a little bit intricate too when your teammate is the horse, right? So it's sometimes the catalyst for causing that anxiety, but also can be the result, or that bond that can kind of help deal with that too. So when horseback riders, equestrians are competing with their horse, there's communication that needs to happen, right? It's that silent communication that you can't really see, and that can trigger normal anxiety or nervousness in a competition setting, but then accidents can happen and things can happen with the horse that would then cause apprehension or mixed signals. And then you and your teammate have to figure out how you're going to be able to get back to where you were and perform better, or to where you want to be. And so it's hard to do that without words. So you need to find a way to manage that conversation. But I think overall, when you compete with a horse, you definitely have that bond or connection that others don't have in any other sport. So I definitely think it's special.
Jenny, would you mind if I just switch gears just for a second? I know that a couple of really famous athletes have been in the news lately, and quite honestly, I think they've been extremely courageous in talking about the issue of mental health, because it is the thing we don't talk about. And I'm thinking of Simone Biles and Naomi Osaka. Simone being a gymnast and Naomi being a tennis player, and for their courage to come out, especially in the face of social media and all the pressure on them, and all the the added sponsorship and the money and the fame and all of that, which I'm sure contributed to their decision. But could you just share with us what happens when you're at that peak, at that level of athleticism? Because one of the things Simone has come out and shared, and Naomi a little bit as well, is that they found themselves starting to maybe rely on substances a little too much for relaxation, that it wasn't really the most appropriate coping skill. And they were both very concerned that they were going in a direction they didn't want to go in, which of course, I think of Jennifer Caparati, She might be a little bit before your time, but she's a very famous tennis athlete who was under tremendous pressure by her dad. It was all over the news. And then she wound up using heroin, and it was a career-ending decision, as you can imagine. So thankful that Simone and Naomi were both able to identify that boundary for themselves. Can you speak a little bit about that pressure of being at the top of your game?
Yes, good question.
I think it's so much more normalized now for athletes to come out and say it. Like we've seen Simone doing it, and she was breaking ground back in 2021 when she did pull out of the Olympics because of a mental health block. And being able to have those conversations, I think, is so important, because when you look at athletes prior to that, like your example, they go to extremes, right? Or latch onto unhealthy coping skills. And I think of mental toughness is not necessarily avoiding adversity, but it's being able to have the coping skills to deal with it. And if your coping skill is to take a step back from competition to be able to deal with what you're feeling, then that is having mental toughness and becoming stronger. So I think the ability before this time, we're having those conversations now, there's pushing now for more athletes to have more resources to those mental health needs, right? Not just bucking down and doing it, because that doesn't necessarily show mental toughness, right? That doesn't show your ability. When you push through and, push yourself to the breaking point, you suffer burnout, right? And then you can't keep going, and that causes an end. So to be able to continue going on to live a life that you want to, that's fulfilling for you, and you cope with it by taking a step back, that is showing that strength. And I think we're being able to look at that narrative as strong athletes, rather than before we were looking at it as all you got to do is put your head down and kind of keep pushing through. And what we've seen now is that just doesn't work.
So I think what I hear you describing is the difference between grit and extreme endurance. Can you clarify that a little bit more for our listeners?
Yeah, I think when you noted extreme endurance, I think that's putting your head down and pushing through it, right? If Simone went onto that floor at Tokyo, what she would have risked would have been greater than the outcome. Even if she was able to do mediocre performance, even if she did an excellent performance, even if she did poor performance, right? That risk there was just too great. She could have seriously injured herself because that mental block was so strong. I don't know if you saw the video of her in the practice room, just falling and falling over and over again.
I did, yes.
And I thought that just spoke volumes, because being able to notice that, right? And it's tricky too, because there's a line, because you don't want to necessarily avoid challenging situations. But if you have the grit, 9 times out of 10, you're the person that's going to buck down and accept the challenge. But this situation just doesn't feel right, then that's not going to help you in the long run. And I think that's also where that mental health stigma comes into play, because only one person can tell that, right? From the outside, you can be like, oh, she could have just bucked down and do it. But really, that was a safety issue, and Simone should not have done it. And we know that wouldn't have been extreme endurance, putting her head down and just pushing through, but she's the only one that could have said that and decided that. So that personal autonomy is huge, in respecting and trusting that athletes know what's best for themselves.
I can't remember or recall the gal's name, but she was a gymnast like Simone, but she was maybe a generation behind her. And she was performing, and she had broken her ankle. And she went on to continue to perform with the broken ankle. And she went ahead and she medaled, and the team won. And everybody kept saying, wow, what team spirit, what commitment, what strength. And I'm thinking to myself, what price? What makes somebody feel as though they have to perform at an Olympic level with a broken ankle? And I just felt so concerned, I guess is probably the best word for that particular athlete. Do you see that every now and then? And how do you encourage people to let go of that need?
I think that is such an individualized question, right? Because it comes back to that autonomy of being able to have that self-awareness of not only what your own athletic identity is, like we talked about before, but also what the boundaries you're going to push yourself towards and do for yourself. That athlete that you're speaking of, I'm also blanking on her name, but she not only ended her career there because of that ankle injury, but couldn't even go back to even coaching or practicing gymnastics. It was just too hard for her. So like you said, I think that is so catastrophic in that end result. And, you know, a lot of what I talk with riders, equestrians about, or my clients, I always like to bring it back to their why. You know, why are you doing this? What's the point? What's the purpose? Mm-hmm. And I think that can be so helpful for each person, each and every day, whether you're an equestrian athlete, you're just an athlete in general, you're a student, you know, you're working in an industry. It doesn't really matter what you're doing, but you need to know why you're there and what motivates you. And I think that piece will help you to be able to set healthy boundaries and have that bandwidth to cope with adversity and to practice your own mental toughness, because it is hard out there. You're gonna have some tough experiences, but to be able to come back from it, set your boundaries, that's strength for sure.
Yeah. Are you ever working with equestrians that come to you and say, I'm lost. I can't find the joy anymore. Not, you know, the mission, the purpose, you know, like what you're saying, get back to your why. And, you know, there's a why and then there's a joy, you know. How do you help people either sustain or find their joy again?
Hard. It's tricky because it's definitely, you know, individualized. I can speak from myself. I love to give this example of talking about your past self and your future self, right? So if you were to think back to the athlete, I like to give the example of myself when I first started riding horses, right? What I would say to my younger self kind of question, and how I would take that advice from my future self. Something I keep by with me every day is this picture when I was 7 years old, me opening Christmas presents. And I just had this bucket of brushes. It was horse brushes, but my face, and I still remember the joy to this day of having my own set of horse brushes. I was ecstatic. And I have so grateful now to have so much more than that, and to be able to go into a store and buy my own set of brushes or horse pants or whatever it is. But I go back to that little girl that was just so excited to have her own set of brushes and just wanted to run to the barn and brush her horse because I just love horses, right? Mm-hmm. So that, I think you have to probe and ask a little bit, but you need to do a little bit self-reflection of your past self.
Before we go to our final break, I just want to wrap up this segment by saying, I guess the key takeaways from the last 12 or so minutes of this discussion is that for someone who's in a very competitive position like Simone Biles versus the one, I'm sorry, I forgot her name. She had broken her ankle and pretty much ended her career, is they were not vocal. I mean, she was not vocal like the way Simone was. So it's a lot about not only setting that boundary and understanding your intention, but also being open and transparent in communicating what your state of mind is. That's pretty much the difference that has helped bring it out into the forefront and bring more awareness to people in that field, correct?
Giving people space to do so, yeah.
Awesome.
And permission to do so.
Exactly. So that all being said, stay tuned, and we're now going to learn when we return about various ways that you will get permission to go see Jenny. If you are looking for someone that's going to help you with sports training or even your mental health issues, where riding your horse will be able to help you sustain yourself. That being said, stay tuned right here on talkradio.nyc and on our YouTube channel. We'll be back in a few.
Hey everybody, it's Tommy Gee, the nonprofit sector connector, coming at you from my attic. Each week here on talkradio.nyc, I host the program Philanthropy in Focus. Nonprofits impact us each and every day, and it's my focus to help them amplify their message and tell their story. Listen each week at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time until 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on talkradio.nyc.
In a post-COVID world, you may have many unanswered questions regarding your health. Are you looking to live a healthier lifestyle? Do you have a desire to learn more about mental health and enhance your quality of life? Or do you just want to participate in self-understanding and awareness? I'm Frank R. Harrison, host of Frank About Health, and each Thursday, I will tackle these questions and work to enlighten you. Tune in every Thursday at 5 p.m. on talkradio.nyc, and I will be frank about health to advocate for all of us.
Calling all pet lovers.
Pet Avengers, assemble!
On the Professionals and Animal Lovers show, we believe the bond between animal lovers is incredibly strong. It mirrors that bond between pets and their owners. Through this program, we come together to learn, educate, and advocate.
Join us live every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at talkradio.nyc.
You're listening to Talk Radio NYC at www.talkradio.nyc. Now broadcasting 24 hours a day.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this final segment of this episode of Frank About Health. So Jenny is basically an expert that those equestrians out there should definitely consult with. That all being said, and that's where people can find you, on your website or other social media platforms that you may have.
Yeah, you can check out my website. It's Jenny Swanson, JennySwanson, so my license letters.com. And then you can also check me out on Instagram at Jenny, JENNYS_LICSW.
Okay. And then overall, what you've discovered since you started school, have you been able to build your own organic community through Instagram? Have you found that to be a real influencer base for you in your practice?
I definitely think social media has been a huge catalyst in not only myself getting the word out there of the services that I provide, but being able to provide people with advice or, snippets, educational information, things and such. So I'm trying to get on Facebook and TikTok as well. But as a millennial, I'm a little slow to the trends, unfortunately, but I'm working on it.
Jenny, could you just restate your Instagram again? Because I know that's so very popular.
Jenny, JENNYS_LICSW.
LICSW?
Yep, you got it.
Okay, good. So I'm going to be following you shortly after this program. Just as an FYI, I did a quick search during the commercial break, and it's Kerri Strug in the 1996 Olympics. But what's interesting enough is underneath Kerri's picture in the internet was this: Kerri Strug was a role model for the kind of sacrifice an athlete needs to be willing to do for the sake of their country. She was 15. Yeah. She vaulted, and she obviously was working with a broken ankle, and she came off her vault, the gold medal winning vault, landed on one foot because the other leg was broken. And it just speaks to, sometimes I think, the work that you're doing, Jenny, is so valuable, and the courage that the Simones of this world and the Naomis of this world, the role modeling that they are showing, it's so very, very powerful. And what I'm taking away from this is that we're finally having the psychological safety to say, okay, no 15-year-old has to compete in athletics in an athletic form with a broken leg to prove that they love their country. Talk about over the top, okay? And there are so many questions that are running through my head about where are her parents at this time. I can't even begin to articulate them. The piece is that you're giving not only voice to a situation, mental health in young people, mental health in young athletes, or athletes of any age. You're offering a service, and what I think you're also saying is that there is a way to become healthier. You've talked about coping skills, you've talked about tools. And, as a nurse, I'm always doing education in and around chronic diseases, or in and around acute injuries, or in and around anything to get to a person to what we term optimal levels of wellness. And I think you and I have a kindred spirit in that way. But I'm really so appreciative of you leaning in and offering this to so many around an issue that doesn't get enough focus, because we are so athletic hero oriented that, the courage to be able to say, wait a minute, I need to step back or do something else. I don't see that supported by society, as evidenced by this ridiculous statement under Kerri Strug's picture, you know? So, you know, give us a sense of where the future is going. And is there any crossover into other things that you can see your training and your gift applying to?
I hope, you know, in all aspects of sport and performance psychology, it's become so much bigger, and especially at their annual conference, you see how it's grown each and every year, and that there's more and more sport psychology, sport and performance psychologists out there working. But I hope it comes to a place where it is normalized, you know, where every team has a consultant or a therapist to chat with, and you know that you don't go to a therapist because something's wrong with you,
right?
And that
you're broken.
Right thing to do, and especially in athletes, right? Especially, I like to think of, I'm a huge football fan myself, so especially for NFL players, you know, that big macho man stereotype, getting rid of that. And so to be able to see that seeking help and having therapy as a strength will then strengthen, you know, athletes in general and the athletic community, because it then becomes that much stronger. It does not a sign of weakness or cause any sort of defeat.
Yes. Are there any other animals that you have known besides horses that actually could have the same type of treatment support for various people for people in various sports or championship professions?
Not to my knowledge. You know, I definitely am a big advocate of dogs myself, especially in dogs and just pet owners in general, and mental health. The research is out there that shows how supportive animals can be in general. And it might even be like an individual thing. I hate snakes, but someone might love snakes and it might be their therapeutic niche. But animals in general, I think, have a great energy to them, and it can be so helpful. And it is actually National Suicide Awareness Month, and yes, people that own dogs. There's the statistic out there that I'm blanking on, but dogs can be such a strong reason for people to not go through with a suicide attempt. And I find that to be just so warm, because animals have that power and have that strength, and to be able to have that privilege of having an animal in your life is really special.
Well, you know, we are social beings by nature, and the worst coping skill or the worst coping mechanism we choose is isolation. And I think, you know, if you ask anybody who is battling depression or losing the sense of joy in just living fully, it's a feeling of separation from everybody else, that they can no longer engage in anything that's giving them that kind of joy. And unfortunately, the pain just gets to the point where they think that self-destruction is the only relief from that pain. Right. I can only imagine that there are those athletes out there where so much pressure is put upon them that, you know, they have these eating disorders or other things that can manifest as signs of, you know, needing help. And I just cannot overstate how grateful I am for you to lend your therapeutic, compassionate nature to the body of, to the community of people really looking to raise mental health awareness and see it as part of a body, mind, and spirit sense of well-being, as opposed to something separate and we should be ashamed or frightened to talk about. So thank you.
Yes. And by the way, I wanted to ask you, your sister suffers from a neurological illness. I'm just wondering, are there any clients of yours who are equestrians, have neurological issues that you also focus on, or is it predominantly the mental health issues?
I think generally speaking, you know, I definitely have clients that come to me with a wide range of issues. I can't say, you know, specifically that they have, you know, a specific diagnoses, but right. I, you know, of course, welcome anyone, but I don't necessarily work with people specifically with epilepsy. But having my sister's experience and having that in my own personal life, I think has been incredibly helpful to have that side and compassionate side too.
And the empathy, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
Especially.
So share your contact information with us one more time, please, Jen.
Yeah, you can look at my website. I also have a blog on there where I post articles, try to keep it up once a week, but sometimes it's every other. Jenny Swanson, JennySwanson.com. licsw.com. And my Instagram is Jenny, JENNYS _LICSW.
Wonderful.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, you heard it there. We're about to sign off, but if any of you have any questions after this show goes off the air, please email me at Frank Harrison. All right, let me get this right. frankharrison1@gmail.com, or go onto my website, www.frankrharrison.com, and you'll be able to ask any questions that myself, Phyllis, or of course Jenny will be able to answer. Stay tuned for Friday's episodes of Philanthropy in Focus and Always Friday right here on talkradio.nyc. And when we return next week, Phyllis and I will be co-hosting Judy Mandel, author of her book, which focuses on addiction, and more on the book next week. So we hope to see you then. And thank you so much, Jenny, for being here. You've completed my Swanson catalog, and I thank you very much. And I basically know that when we sign off, we're literally going to be disconnected. So let's communicate maybe today or tomorrow to follow up. And I'm just grateful to you, Phyllis, as well. And we'll see you all next week. All right.
Thank you, Dad. Best to you, Dad.
Bye. Same here.